Welcome back to Proud Masculine. I'm Joe, and today's video is going to be, we're going to talk about facing demons, the inner demons, and the traumas and responses that come up according to certain triggers, which usually manifests itself in a pattern in a traumatic response that forms in a pattern of the way you respond to certain events, whatever the trigger might be, and what that looks like. And you can apply this to relationships, personal goals, jobs, career. Anything that comes up to where it seemingly, when you arrive at a certain point, it seems to fall apart. Unknowingly at times and unwittingly, it's a subconscious traumatic response to a negative association you may have to that certain event or certain stage of an event. An example, and I've done a ton of videos on no contact and relationships and improvement and trauma clearing and working on certain limitations and whatnot. So the easy example I can give is in a traumatic response to a relationship, and this is something I've had to deal with personally, is an association with being loved and what that means and what that looks like. And this usually stems from childhood. I say usually, a large majority of the time, it's an association and attachment with love that stems from childhood, that you lack the love, the security, the protection, and the stability needed as a child, and the positive reinforcement that you loved and worth it as a child. And that embeds in your subconscious, and that's the model you take of the world, and especially love, forward into your adult life. Now, from childhood through your teens, obviously adolescent years, you're not going to really fall in love with somebody. You might have it's called a crush or something. But as you get older, and there is a genuine emotional attachment to somebody, the way this traumatic response pattern may manifest itself in a relationship is when you really begin to have those strong emotions of connection, attachment, and love with this person. And unknowingly at first, and this is why it develops into a pattern, because in the beginning it's hard to spot, your auto response might be from the association of love and attachment you have as a child, is that this is not going to turn out good. So a traumatic response would be sabotage in some kind of way, whether you pull back, whether you shut this person out, whether you do things to force that person away. It manifests itself in a few different ways. End result being you accomplish that end result of the idea, of the core belief you have about love from your experience. You get to that conclusion or that ending before it happens. So apply that to a job. You get a job, you do well, you get some responsibility and pressure, to do better, and you get a promotion. You may have something anchored in childhood about a negative self-belief or an inner core belief, a limiting belief about yourself. You may not do well enough, and so inadvertently, through a traumatic response, you sabotage a position. You don't put yourself in a position to even begin to try to succeed and see what that looks like. Because deep down in the subconscious, it's already telling you you failed or you can't do it. You get the picture, I'm sure. And little side note, all this is rooted in fear. Two basic forms of fear: a fear of you're not going to get what you want, or you're going to lose what you have. And it's an unhealthy way, but as time goes on, and this is why I always impress doing the work. Always, always, always. And this is why I beat that horse so often and so hard, is because through time you build this awareness. You start to form this awareness and see the unhealthy behaviors and see how it doesn't align with what you want and where you want to be. It's off. So now you can be able to start identifying the beginnings of this unhealthy response coming to the surface. Therefore, you can address it and work on it and remove it. So here's a few things I've put together that I've implemented over the years. And look, you should never be ashamed of facing these things and having to admit and seek help for these things. It's not a rare thing. A lot of people feel alone in these things and develop this toxic shame. I've done a video on that. This toxic shame, like you're fucked up somehow because you have these things. It is so common. Everybody's had something they've had to deal with. Trauma in one form or another. And it's, from each individual, it's relative. You know, some people could have had abandonment issues as a child, but we're able to overcome that, and it affects them somewhat in a relationship or, you know, later in life. But it may not be as severe as somebody who's suffered the same experience and has the same abandonment anxiety, abandonment issues, who absolutely is under the control of that when it's triggered. Nonetheless, everybody has stuff to deal with. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And it actually takes a lot more balls to, you know, acknowledge and face this stuff than it does to avoid it and pretend like it doesn't exist and think you're just going to push through it, because it doesn't just magically go away. Matter of fact, over time, unaddressed, it'll get worse and worse and worse. And you know the saying, what you resist persists, what you face, you find a solution. And that couldn't be truer. The more you resist. So here I'll go into the first thing here is to acknowledge. Acknowledge the pattern. At the very least, bare minimum, acknowledge that there is an unhealthy pattern. Give it its credit, give it its due, because it's there and it keeps showing up in one form or another. And if you resist persists, it's only a matter of time. Like, you may even get through that and kid yourself through the experience, like, to chalk it up to an external circumstance. Well, this didn't work out, well, that didn't work out. Inevitably, it will resurface. And it comes to a point where you just have to develop the awareness, which you will over time if you're doing the work, and acknowledge that, yes, there is a limiting self-belief. There is a deep underlying issue that needs to be addressed. And this is where you begin to gain power over this toxic attachment, toxic pattern, unhealthy, limited self-belief, self-destructive behavior, self-sabotage. This is the very first step in overcoming and gaining power over this thing. Acknowledging it is, and the reason acknowledging it is so powerful is like, okay, this exists. I see you. I see what this is. Now it's no longer, it can't control you at this point. And now, acknowledging it, there's something about that process, I don't know what it is psychologically, but it's now yours to own, to take ownership of it. And it's your responsibility to work through it at that point. The next step is take responsibility. Now, take responsibility doesn't mean, say if you were beaten as a child, and this is just an example. If somebody's a victim of child abuse or sexual abuse as a child, that's not your responsibility. Like, you didn't do that. You didn't cause that. But taking responsibility of it, taking ownership of it now means, okay, it did happen. Was it my fault then? But now it's up to me to work through it and clear and replace that experience and that trauma with something more productive that suits me to moving on to a happier, healthier life and a better relationship with yourself and the outside world. And with that, taking responsibility is not falling into the victim role. There's power in victimhood, but it's limited to the other people, the power that other people are giving you, who will give you permission, so to speak, to be the victim. There's that power in it. And you oftentimes see a lot of people do that, but they never get real far or real high with anything, because they're always a victim. You know, the sooner you acknowledge, the sooner you take responsibility, the sooner you can move on and let the experience go and put it behind you and replace it with a better experience, a more fulfilling, loving, experience. Moving on. You know, at this point, you've acknowledged you've taken responsibility. You've identified. You've built the awareness. You've identified. Now it's time to seek help. There's nothing wrong, and I'll say it again, there's nothing to be ashamed of for confronting these things and getting help. It takes a lot more courage and balls to go down into those dark places and look at these limiting things. Nobody likes to, especially looking outward, you see these people who appear to be so well put together and, the confidence, the success, the this, the that. And having to come to terms with that acknowledges that there's something off. But that doesn't mean you're broken. It doesn't mean you're wrong. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And again, I'll reiterate, it takes courage to look at that and work through that. Because through that process, there's going to be a time when you have to readdress that. And you have to feel what that's like to a degree in order to clear it, bring it to surface, clear it, and replace it. And at that point, you've acknowledged, taken responsibility, you're seeking help, take massive action. Be the lead in your own rescue. And there are resources that can help as a supporting role. I'm a man of faith, a man of God. Do I live it perfectly? No. But I pray, and this is where I seek answers. This is where I seek answers and solutions. I also have, resources. I have a mentor. I have resources. There's therapists out there that can facilitate this process. Vet your therapist well. And just like in any space, in any profession, and any walk of life, there's some shit you're going to have to sort through out there to find something that fits and a good one that's actually going to find your solutions. And, so vet your therapist, but there are therapists out there that can get you help. There's all means of, there's all different means of healing and working through stuff. There's all sorts of resources out there. And especially with the reach we have today with social media, online, when you can Google anything, you can Google trauma clearing and boom, you got a list of dozens of people in driving distance that you can begin to get help from. And then look, if you need help with this, to share my process and how I work through things and what that looks like, proudmasculine.com pricing. You can also reach me on my Instagram at proudmasculine, DM, or email proudmasculine@yahoo.com. I can start there, and we'll work on what it looks like for you to recover, for you to start healing and moving through these things, and what that process looks like, and what I've done personally. Look, it happens to everybody. There's nobody walking around in this life that does not have something that's unresolved and not dealt with, that comes up from time to time. Now, what you'll often see, and what we tend to do as humans, is to judge people externally. But I'll guarantee you, there's more people out there walking around that avoid that trigger, that subconsciously know where that limitation lies, and they just don't go in that area. Like in relationships, they have people that'll get in a relationship and have a mediocre relationship that really won't open themselves up to giving and receiving love fully and what that looks like. There's people who limit themselves in their careers. They'll stick to one small thing that they're good at and do it over and over and over again, and never look at that limitation because of that uncomfortable feeling it brings, and that jar that trauma loose and take them back to that ugly place. There's people that won't challenge themselves because of something that happened that they associate with negatively, who will plateau and stay like that for the rest of their lives. Some people simply don't have the awareness. Some people just have this internal sense of repelling themselves away from that challenge, that relationship, that career, or whatever. But they just don't do it. They don't know why. They're just uncomfortable. Doesn't make sense. And part of the process is being uncomfortable. It's getting uncomfortable. But that's where the growth is. Nothing grows in the comfort zone. That's a death chamber. Is your comfort zone. This warm, fuzzy little place where it's not real good, it's not real bad, but it's really comfortable. You don't have to step outside of it. There's potentially things bigger and better, more exciting. And I don't just mean like mountain adventures or whatnot, but a different state of mind, an elevated state of mind and sense of self that exists. But there's also the potential for the loss of that. And that's what keeps a large majority of people in the comfort zone. Look around, you see it everywhere. You see it everywhere. That glazed over look. A lot of these people walking around. And look, no judge, no shame. If that's what you do, then do it. But for the people watching this video, there's a reason you're on the internet looking at this stuff. And there's the truth. So, yeah, good. I hope you got something out of that. And look, also down below in the description, I've added a donation button. If you feel what you've heard in this video or other videos have helped, donate a little bit. It will go straight to the channel. It will allow me to enhance the production value and afford more time to put more content out there to help more people. And again, you need my help, proudmasculine.com pricing. I've listed the other places. I'll put them in the description. See you on the next one.